Hello, it is November 21st, 2023. Welcome to the Thanksgiving edition of BRAP. And I was actually thinking about maybe doing a show on Wednesday, but then I was like, you know what, the holiday's Thursday, and so I was like, let me do a special BRAP on Tuesday, so that way, everyone can enjoy time with friends and family. I know Wednesdays, the day before Thanksgiving, actually tends to be a big day for people to go out and partake in festivities, if you will, prior to Thanksgiving. So, and unfortunately, my Washington Commanders will play the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday as well. So hopefully they win. That would be a great, Thanksgiving treat. But I will say this: I'm tired of the media bias against the Commanders. I'm calling it the Commanders tax. The media doesn't talk about the Philadelphia Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs the way they do about the Washington Commanders. So on that note, I want to introduce Game Logic. What's going on, Game Logic?
I'm okay. How are you?
Yeah, what do you think about that Commanders tax?
Well, it's for all the reasons, of the things other people do. Bill Belichick, other dirty NFL teams, the referees, the Japanese FTC. The Commanders are trying to go around and make these deals with cloud companies to help them, compete. And it's just because of these dirty deals that NFL teams make that are the reason that the Commanders can't succeed.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. It's like the NFL's against them or something. There's like this, they don't want to see him succeed.
Yeah, if the Eagles were to do the exact same thing, right, they would be given a pass.
I mean, this is true. I mean, the Eagles would definitely get a pass, and so would the Kansas City Chiefs, and Tom Brady at that matter. What about Tom Brady? I mean, he was deflating footballs.
Well, I mean, I heard he was fired.
I believe he was fired. I don't think he retired on his own accord. I believe he was fired. See how that works, by the way, when you interchange companies or sporting teams and you apply the same thought to what we're hearing about the Xbox tax. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the truth about the Xbox tax. The Last of Us 2 remaster. Who asked for that, Tam? Who asked for Logic? Who asked for that Last of Us remaster 2 for PlayStation 5? I saw some of that commentary going around when that was released, or when that news was announced by Naughty Dog. We'll also discuss Xbox hardware losing market share, if that's something to be concerned about. But want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this I shouldn't say impromptu. I think I planned this yesterday, but I notified everyone quite late in the day. So thank you so much for joining us. Please, OBJ to Don. The Wizards suck, by the way. They're terrible. OBJ is a big. I think he's a Wizards fan still. I don't know. I do see you tweeting about the Wizards every once in a while. And you know what? Hey, I think it's the NBA. They don't want the Wizards to be good. It's the Wizards tax. Yeah, so please do me a favor, hit that like button. I'm going to drop a link here in the live chat. Please do me a favor, retweet the link or share it on your favorite social media platform. All right, so Logic, I know we talked about the Xbox tax a little bit last week when we had Spigdretti on as our guest. But this thing is still going. Actually, it was trending earlier today on Twitter. The Xbox tax was. I was listening to Post Up articulate his grand conspiracy, and I've been going back and forth with him about this whole thing. Look, yes, OBJ to Don, they will always be the Bullets to me as well. I will never refer to them as the Wizards. I think the Wizards is a terrible name. They should bring back the Bullets. But not just him, but others with the Xbox tax. This thing is just gaining momentum, gaining traction.
20. Here's a number between 1 and 20. It's 2.
Logic, can you hear me? I hear some background noise there. All right. So the Xbox tax, we're getting some. It's getting more traction, and again, look, it's really. It's unfortunate that people are falling for conspiracies, and I went into Post Up's. He did a live YouTube video yesterday, and he was discussing the conspiracy theory about the Xbox tax and how this dates back to, the early 2000s and people's attitudes towards Microsoft. Look, I don't disagree that Microsoft perception back in the early 2000s probably wasn't as good as it is today, given the antitrust. I know, Logic, you and I have talked about the Microsoft antitrust hearings. If I remember correctly, they were found guilty by the DOJ. Is that correct? I remember that correctly?
Admittedly, I'm not a little recency bias or anti-bias. I'm not as up to speed on that history because I haven't looked at it recently. But I think they were found guilty and then appealed and then settled, I believe was the case. Because I think something was thrown out because of some mistake in the judge procedure. But also Microsoft knew that they were, caught red-handed enough that they did not want to go back through another retrial, so they settled. I think was the case.
Okay, yeah. So So I mean, they're they had a little bit of a tarnished image, and were investigated by the Department of Justice for antitrust, anti-competitive behavior, and. So he talks about that, and believe it or not, I was actually in the live chat there, and I actually one of the mods there put me in timeout.
I think you were censored. I think
I was censored, basically censored because
they took away, attacked your freedom of speech.
Yes, they did. My freedom of speech. They attacked it. Which, look, I mean, his mod has every right to censor me, whatever. It's his channel. All jokes aside about the freedom of speech stuff. But I think what was telling about it was that this individual was like, BRAP is coming in here, trying to be polite and trying to sound educated, as if that was a bad thing. Because what I was doing was I was challenging some of the points that Post Up was making. And by the way, this is not an attack on Post Up or anything. Please don't take it that way. I don't have any issue with him. I think he's a nice individual. I've had conversations with him. I just disagree with him. And I disagree with anyone who believes in this grand conspiracy of an Xbox tax. And I say that because in light of this conspiracy theory, I mean, we have tangible proof, evidence that says otherwise, that this just doesn't exist. And I know he was posting a clip by Larry Herb, Major Nelson, interview with Game Over Greggy, where he was saying to Greg Miller, that maybe it's because people don't like using Windows products, and they're tired of using. They're like, I got to use a spreadsheet, or I got to use, Microsoft Office, and maybe that bleeds into people's perceptions. But prior to him saying that, Larry Herb says, we understand that publishers are measured by different measuring stick, or judged by different measuring sticks. And if you play video games, that should be obvious. We don't hold. Activision, before they were acquired by Microsoft, we didn't hold them in the same breath as Embracer Group. We don't hold
or Devolver Digital. We don't expect the same games from Devolver Digital that we expect from EA or we expect from Activision. Look, great Scott, man. We have models after models after models after models for this. We do not hold an NCAA Division III school to the same things that we expect from Division I schools. Like, let's grow up, understand that there are differences in rubrics, understand that there are stratification, understand that there are tiers, and stop acting childish. Like, that's a concept that we can't, like, again, these conversations revolve around, like, a level of intelligence and emotional maturity that, like, are severely lacking, and I don't get it. Just the same way that we don't expect a Ferrari, right, to have worse craftsmanship than a Ford. There are very simple analogs to reach for.
Yeah, and if you were to talk to somebody who writes for Car and Driver, as an example, they would understand this. That they don't hold BMW, let's say. Their measuring stick is a bit different for BMW compared to Hyundai. So I mean, these are things that we see outside of video games. So Larry Herb wasn't incorrect, but to take that and say, well, there's a different measuring stick. That's proof of the Xbox tax. No, I mean, like, if you truly play video games, that comment should be obvious. Again, we don't expect. I think you said Devolver Digital to give us the same kind of games as Activision or From Software. We just don't expect that.
And let's also talk about that notion, right? And in the notion of corroborating your hypothesis, right? It seems very strange to me in rationale in that it's not Xbox performs poorly commercially. Period. Like like I always say on the show, like it seems like every week, I'm not going to have an argument about that. They don't have the same revenue. They don't have the same number of console sales. Their software sales, when you look at games titles, are the same since they crawled back out of the bathtub. Right? They perform poorly commercially. In respect to, right, in particular respect to the amount of resources that they have. They don't compete. They're the third place user install base in terms of console platforms. They were second place in revenue before the acquisition, right? So that data point isn't sufficient. They then also tend to not get the same number of awards, right? They're handed out, not for the TGAs, but when you look across all of the award shows, of which there are something like somewhere between 8 and a dozen, they don't get the same number of awards. And when you look at that data correlation and the number of awards that they get, the amount of critical acclaim they get, they don't get it. Right? Then you have media sentiment that correlates with those other two data points. And so across those three stovepipes, those three tent poles, that's not enough to arrive at a conclusion that maybe the market isn't responding and resonating with Xbox because of the products that Xbox produces, not because of the notion of media bias. If one of those things was if one of those things were true, if it was Xbox bias, Xbox tax, then that would be a thing that would happen not in correlation with the other things. That would be propaganda that was anti-Xbox, that didn't correlate with their commercial performance, that didn't correlate with their critical acclaim. But all of those three things are in harmony.
Mm-mm. Which, by the way, to your point, Logic, during the Xbox 360 generation, and when we had Colin Moriarty on, he said this: we primarily, in the media, primarily cover the Xbox 360. Why is that?
Because it was the lead platform, and because they were performing commercially.
Yeah, because they were the lead platform. They were doing well, not just from a hardware sales standpoint, but also from a software release standpoint. They were in conversations for Game of the Year. And, like people talk about media bias. I mean, a lot of these people clearly don't pay attention to the Golden Joystick Awards, where the media nominates the nominees for each category. Starfield was nominated for Game of the Year. And the fans vote on those nominees on the Golden Joysticks Award, or in the Golden Joystick Awards. The fans select the winners. I'm going to pick on Viper XT here, because Viper XT, what you're saying, and I heard this yesterday, you say when you dismiss the tangible evidence of bias against Xbox, there's no tangible evidence, sir. Then, of course, you'll believe it's non-existent. It's not surprising, though, as a majority of media grew up PlayStation fans. Again, this is a talking point that Post Up said yesterday. Oh, well, the media grew up PlayStation fans, so therefore they're biased against Xbox. Well, wouldn't that apply to the media of the 360 generation then? They also grew up playing PlayStation. They primarily cover the 360 generation. And if you're going to say there's tangible evidence, what evidence is that? Because it's like an Xbox first-party game gets a bad review, media bias. But then you skate by the other reviews that have been positive for first-party Xbox games. A lot of you guys like to pick on IGN. IGN gave Forza Horizon 5 a 10. A 10. The Metacritic score for Hi-Fi Rush is at a 91. Hi-Fi Rush has been nominated for 5 categories in this year's Game Awards. Paul Tassi gave Hi-Fi Rush a 10 when he reviewed the game. So
Forza Motorsport, Metascore 85.
85. Microsoft also was Publisher of the Year in 2021 by Metacritic. If a bias exists, how does that happen? How does a game that gets a 10? Are you then arguing that the media only turns on the bias at certain times? Well, you know what, guys? Our bias is showing a little bit. They're on to us, so we got to give Forza Horizon 5 a 10. We don't want these Xbox guys to catch on to what we're doing. 'Cause that's literally what you're arguing.
And the other points of data correlation, right? I pointed out Forza Motorsport. We get, again, Metascore of 85 on Xbox, Metascore of 83 on PC. In the Steam user community, the Steam user reviews are at 38%. So again, if there's a media bias, why didn't the media tank Forza Motorsport when the consumer base on PC finds that game not up to snuff?
Yeah.
How did Starfield have an 83, whereas on the Steam user community finds it at a 68? Right? And again, I'm not saying that the Steam user community reviews are, the summary of the entire consumer base, but they are a significant data indicator of what the consumer uptake is, right? And consumer level of quality, consideration, and viewpoint is on that title, on those titles.
Yeah, Viper XT, I'm really going to pick on you because this mentality is part of the problem in this conspiracy theory, and it really does more harm to the Xbox product than good. Because what you do when you're a fan, I've always said, fanboyism is anti-consumer behavior, because it's never about accountability. It can never just be, well, hey, maybe Microsoft doesn't release enough good games. Or maybe Microsoft isn't performing well in the market. And maybe Microsoft has made decisions that have hurt the brand, which is why you see, like we're going to talk about this Xbox losing market share. Xbox hardware sales for the Xbox Series consoles are down year over year, 52%. But you saying that, IGN has one reviewer. Okay, well, I mean, so one reviewer reviewed a game bad? Look at the consensus. I mean, we have Metacritic. We have Metacritic that you can look at to kind of get an idea where reviews fall. Obviously, there's going to be reviews that are going to be on the higher end of the spectrum. There's going to be reviews on the lower end. But you get it. But the meta gives you a good middle ground of where the review for a game is falling.
Sorry, I got myself worked up, and I needed to remind myself that for all of Viper's resistance and the choice of certain members of that community to not acknowledge the data correlation, I need to remind myself that they represent 9% of the console install base, and to just understand their irrelevance at their anger and antagonism and whatever Post Up was saying on his channel with conspiracy theories. So
yeah, and the thing that's interesting is that Viper's argument for the coverage of the Xbox 360 is it launched a year before the PlayStation 3. It did, but you still need to execute as a company, as a product. You still have to deliver the goods. Like a year ahead launch isn't an automatic that you're going to beat the competition. You still have to deliver software. You still have to deliver compelling content that drives people to your platform. That isn't a give me. And even in light of the Red Ring of Death, I might add, the media's coverage.
They were still the number one platform that generation until literally the last 12 months.
Exactly. I mean, like Hoovy just mentioned, Dreamcast launched a year before the PS2. There you go. Viper XC is not surprising when it's unnecessary, constant negative talk takes for clickbait. I mean, that's across the board. Which we'll talk about gaming journalism here shortly too. Like I don't think Logic, you and I very much agree that there is a Washington Commanders tech, Matty Beast. I'm convinced of it. you and I both agree that the media coverage at times in the gaming industry is just not good.
It's poor. I mean, it's been on a steady decline since 20 years ago when the likes of Gary Whitta and Greg Viederman were the editors in chief at PC Gamer, and the crew Gordon Maung was at Maximum PC, and it's just been on a slow, steady decline. I talk about that all the time, including like the Games Radar article, right, that got ran yesterday, noting, its assertion that Starfield user community reviews had tanked on Steam, and I was like, that's not valid. That's not news. It's been like that for a month. We reported on that here. But again, I mean, what I'm sure somebody will do is they will run off with that baton and say, "Oh, see, that's the indicator of the Xbox tax." Again, Brad talks about that being across the board, right? That's not an Xbox thing. That's poor reporting and poor journalism thing. I don't necessarily attribute that to a bias towards the console. We also see dumb reports, in my opinion. The PlayStation Portal, slew of reviews that have been out, have been reviews that, in my mind, are heavily skewed based on a generational divide, and some people who just don't get the use case, people who are not technologically savvy and don't understand Wi-Fi and networking. But again, that's a hit on PlayStation. I don't think just because it was PlayStation it got given a pass. Some outlets reviewed the PlayStation Portal positively because of the manner in which they reviewed it and the lens that they were reviewing it through. I don't think that's necessarily because it was PlayStation. Now, if you're an outlet that is called, I don't know, PlayStation whatever, or if you're an outlet that is Xbox era or Game Pass rankings, yeah, I then think that your reviews and your considerations of those platforms are always going to be positive. But those things are readily recognizable and identifiable, and it shouldn't result in the conclusion that you're just going to take that accusation of bias and slather it across the entire journal space.
Yeah, and that's what they do. They like you said, they slathered across the entire base and claim media bias, Xbox tax. I mean, they probably believe the election was stolen. And it's no, I mean, like it's ridiculous. I mean, and this idea of media bias, this goes back to like since I've been on the gaming Twitter since 2013, and I've talked to journalists about media bias, like this the Xboxes. That there's this Illuminati that's behind only reporting negative news and tearing down the Xbox, and some of the media types that I talked to have kind of laughed at that notion. Do they agree that as gamers they have preference? Absolutely. But there isn't this grand conspiracy against Xbox the way people are making it out to be. And frankly, I'm starting to see it as more of a deflection tactic. It's not anything that Microsoft did to put themselves in this position or put the Xbox platform in this position. It's the media's fault. And you should never, ever excuse the poor performance of a corporation and how it's handled its own products. Demand better. Demand better as a consumer. And that's the problem. Yeah.
You guys can go get that link that I just dropped in the chat. I mean, that's the way I consider the, taking the out that they're going to blame everyone else for how the platform is doing commercially.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just, and look, like you said, Logic, like the game journalism, like, hey, we all agree. It's not great at times. Matt Piscatella, who we've had on the show before, is kind of giving himself his flowers. He pulled an old Bloomberg article where Bloomberg basically made a. Let me pull up this tweet here. In the article, he says that the article by Bloomberg, an analyst, and this is an analyst was quoted as saying Nintendo hasn't delivered. Investors thought over 5 years they could sell maybe 90 million units. But after this year, that's looking pretty much impossible. And what's happened since that article was written 5 years ago? I mean, it's what the Nintendo Switch is at 135 million? It's either 125 or 135. I forget.
Yeah, 131, something like that. It's up there.
Is it 131? Yeah. I forget what you said in the BRAP chat about analysts not being able to analyze or something. That article.
It's the market. It's the market analysis outlet not being able to analyze the market.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I keep telling you guys on the show and telling people on Twitter, Bloomberg is not the bellwether that people make it out to be. They get it wrong. They've been called on the carpet by multiple companies. They've been called on the carpet by Apple twice, Nintendo, Dell. Stop raising them up. They are not the torchbearers that people think that they are. And I recently wrote a blog post why the Jason Schreier articles are also not the indictment that people think that they are.
Yeah, no, I agree. But to your point, that article about the Steam user reviews for Starfield, like I don't disagree with you. I didn't think that was really a newsworthy article. To me, that's just like, hey, it's a slow news week. We got to get some information out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the Dextero article, right? When we were in the launch window for Starfield, that made a big deal out of what was it? Alex trying to explain the gas giant to that guy or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's typical of how games journalism, doesn't report news, doesn't follow their due diligence, doesn't have journalistic integrity or hold themselves to a high standard.
Yep. Hey, Logic, True King Gaming has got a question for you in the live chat if you want to read that real quick, but not out loud, but if you want to take a look at that. And then you can respond to him if you like, either in chat or here.
No, I don't want to type. Just let me know when you have a window to respond.
Okay. Yeah, but no, and that's just one of many examples. When they start, it's slow news cycle when they start quoting conversations that are happening amongst people on Twitter. But that's also part of the 24/7 news cycle, the need to drive engagement. And I always say this, like people, like I think it just in my opinion, Logic. I think we're at a point now, and this is just my opinion with media in general. I think we're at a point now we have to do our due diligence as consumers of media. Like we have to fact check. We have to identify reliable sources that kind of do the things that you mentioned that journalists should be doing, Logic, which often doesn't happen. But I think we need to be careful. We just can't take information and assume that it's all true. That there isn't missing context. I have this conversation with my parents all the time. They drive me the whole, and I've had, not that my parents think the election was stolen, but I think they've watched enough Fox News. They started believing that maybe it was stolen. And this goes back to the Xbox tax, by the way. What people don't realize, and Viper XT was doing this, he was rattling off talking points that I've heard on other Xbox-centric podcasts. Because what happens is because this big circle jerk of information, and it eventually, if you start hearing it enough from podcasts that clearly have an obvious bias, it starts becoming reality. You hear it enough. Oh, wait, maybe this is true. And so my parents would watch Fox News. Say, look, you need to fact check what you're listening to, what they're telling you. Are they leaving pieces of information out? And I feel like as consumers of media, we have to take that upon ourselves to do that now. We have to do our due diligence. Go ahead, Logic. You can answer now.
So I gave part of the general answer, which is that Jez, in my opinion, Jez just isn't a credible journalist. He scorched that earth, during the ABK trials and how he acted all emotionally about things and didn't really process information in a logical, rational manner. And in my opinion, had several instances of not doing his due diligence. And I also wrote off Windows Central back in 2021 when they ran an article after the TGAs, wailing and gnashing of teeth and kind of dragging the TGAs as being I'm not sure exactly what term they use, but basically said because they wouldn't allow a racing game into consideration, and on top of that, it was just because of Xbox. So I mean, BRAP sent me the link to that, but as I also mentioned to BRAP, please stop sending me things that I'm not going to read because they aren't credible and they aren't worth my time. So, as soon as I saw that it was Jez, I just dropped it. That outlet just does not follow a level of discipline and regimen that makes it worth my time to consider what they write. What I will say is, I believe the general assumption should be that basically what the ABK deal does from a revenue perspective is it should put them at near parity with Sony, with PlayStation, whenever they've got a full year of runtime. That basically, if you simply linearly take the Activision revenue number from the preceding fiscal year and add it to the Xbox division revenue number, that you come up with a number that is relatively close, in hundreds of millions of dollars to the PlayStation revenue, right, versus the old $9 billion gap. And so that's where they stand, right? And then from there, right, it's going to depend on how each of them adjust their strategies going forward. Falky has mentioned that they'll fall a little short. They should fall a little short of that because there will be some bleed off from that acquisition, meaning, number one, as they start to, and it all depends on when this happens, as they start to convert some of those games and make them available in Game Pass, or even just as they become discounted, right, on the Xbox store, because now Game Pass subscribers will get them at a reduced price, so they don't even have to go into Game Pass. They'll just get the reduction. That's going to mean, in general, you spent X number of millions of dollars to produce Diablo 4. You had revenue projections based around selling that game at a certain price, and now you're going to be selling it for less. That inherently means that, from a projection standpoint and a guidance perspective, when they get to that point where they're issuing guidance, that the total amount of money coming in is just going to be less, right, for a given title out of that portfolio. So,
yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I didn't put too much stock in that article, by the way, especially when people were questioning the news source, and then Jez said, "Hey, you know what? You need to." I forget what site he used. He's like, "You need to talk to them, not me." I'm like, "What? Wait a minute."
He used Newzoo, which I but generally when I pull numbers together, I generally use either Newzoo or Statista, because those are two sources that you can get generally good information from, because you can't get behind the veil on MPD, and they put a lot more of their stuff out in front of the paywall. So I don't think his source was bad. I just, I would assume that there was some tomfoolery or just a lack of, educated rationale in however he processed those numbers and came up with the math he came up with.
Yeah. Viper XT is going back there. Look, Viper again. There's no look. Maybe you believe. Actually, Viper, I got a question for you. Do you believe the election was stolen? And do you believe the Earth is flat? You keep saying it's there, has been for years. There's no tangible evidence of that. If I don't, how can I see something that doesn't exist? You guys have created this illusion in your mind, and actually, it's a little disconcerting now. But seriously, do you believe the election was stolen? I'm just curious. He says no and no. Okay, so you're somewhat of a rational human being. But Viper, you do understand the same behavior you're exhibiting, and the way you guys are discussing the Xbox tax is the same way people were discussing the election being stolen.
So I guess maybe another question is, so Viper, maybe it's two questions. Viper, do you believe that Microsoft makes good products that resonate with the market? Is question one. And then question two is, do you believe Microsoft in aggregate makes a better overall gaming platform product, meaning both hardware and software that it puts on offer each year, better, not cheaper, not less expensive, not more accessible? Do you believe that it is better in aggregate than what PlayStation does?
That's a long question. Greg Von Noob says, "Brap, you need to put the sunglasses on so you can see the truth." I mean, look, I guess like Viper. I mean, if there's media bias, there's this conspiracy. Xbox tax. How did Microsoft get Publisher of the Year? How was Starfield nominated for Game of the Year by the Golden Joysticks? Ricardo says, "Brap, you have to respect other people's opinions." No, I don't. Why do I need to respect other people's opinion, Ricardo? I mean, like why? I mean, like, look, I've always said you're entitled to your own opinions. You're just not entitled to your own facts. I love that. You got to respect people's. No, I don't. I don't.
Did he answer either of those two questions?
He said sometimes, not always.
Okay, great Scott, man. Like, if you're going to come in here and be insistent and jump up and down and set a trash can on fire, you need to do quid pro quo and answer the question. But what I asked was in aggregate.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't know what that word means. I'm assuming he does. Yeah, Mr. Grims, this is Alex Jones territory. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is crossing into tinfoil hat. The election was stolen. The Earth is flat. Like level conspiracy theories, in light of actual facts. You know, like Pentiment was. Okay, hold on a sec here. I'm going to pull up Pentiment. IGN gave Pentiment a 10.
Jeez.
I'm going to look up the Metacritic for Pentiment. Pentiment, which is an Xbox first-party studio, or by an Xbox first-party studio, sits at a Metacritic of 86. Okay, so let's look at the aggregate here. 86. Let's see here. I'm looking at hundreds here. Actually, IGN did not give it 100. IGN France gave it a 90. Xbox Era gave it an 87. I don't see it here. Hold on, let me look. IGN's not popping up here. Anyhow, I think you would agree, Hamp, that Metacritic 86 is a pretty good score, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I suppose because it didn't get 100, it's because of the Xbox tax.
Right. Well, Brap, remember, 83 is not good enough for Starfield.
All right. So IGN, who the Xbox fanatics like to pick on, the meta. Again, this is the meta. The meta for Pentiment is 86. IGN gave Pentiment a 10 and called it a masterpiece. I mean, so Viper, I mean, so explain that. How does the tax exist if IGN's giving games a 10 that are first party games? Again, is it run on a is it based on a cycle of hey, this week is Xbox tax week?
Well, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. I guess that's the Viper explanation.
Jesus Christ. I can't, man. I really can't. I just can't.
Wait, let's also, as I always love to do, revisit the textbook definition of bias. A prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. A systematic distortion of a statistical result due to a factor not allowed for in its deviation. Again, I would say maybe if you're speaking and you have a negative opinion of a product that is not doing well on the market, that is not a bias. That is you giving voice to maybe the rationale or reason why it is not doing commercially well on the market, or why that product isn't being given awards when compared to other pieces of artistic work or entertainment. I don't think you are distorting those statistical results.
Yeah, and Viper XT, you keep saying different reviewers when I'm citing games. Someone at IGN give it a 10. You're just moving the goalpost now. I'm presenting you evidence to the contrary, and the only thing you can come back with is different reviewers. So if a review within different reviews of media, okay, so what? So what? Are you speaking of Dan Stapleton? Is that who you're talking about? Because I know you guys like to pick on him.
And I agree with Sleepy Light's comment in chat. I mean, all people are biased in some ways, just naturally and inherently. It's unavoidable. So again, they're trying to come up with this word salad to extrapolate a meaning that doesn't mean what it means.
Yeah, hold on a second. I'm trying to find.
And Brad, we got a lot of topics to cover, man. You gotta pull out of the nosedive with Viper.
Yeah. Let's see here. Hold on. Dan Stapleton. Hold on. I'm just going to provide. So he likes to, because they like to pick on Dan Stapleton. Dan Stapleton gave a Starfield a 7, I think. Which, by the way, if you read his review, it's actually not a negative review per se. Dan Stapleton, he actually gave Gears Tactics an 8. Said it was a great game. Different reviewers. Oh, he's saying that that different reviewers would the same media house will view platinum platforms differently. They'll review games differently, sure, but not every game's going to get a consistent like score. Anyhow, okay. All right, hey, Naughty Dog's announced The Last of Us Part 2 remaster for PS5 will be coming out January of next year. And I got to say, like, you know, we were critical of PlayStation's upgrade path early in the generation. Like, you and I think both agree that the messaging was pretty bad.
It was just typical of, you know, what Sony's handling of things in the kind of late Sean Layden era, early Jim Ryan era, where, you know, they often just made a thing that didn't need to be a thing, but it was made a thing because they kept talking about it. They made it a thing because they kept, I would say, being less than fully transparent about it, you know, and ascribing blame and rationale to things that didn't really exist, right? You know, manufacturing, you know, mystifying a thing that wasn't really mystified, and, you know, making a big Baba Yaga, right? For causalities that didn't really exist.
Well, who asked for this remaster? That's what I want to know.
No, I would say, I mean, what they found is when they did the TLU 1 remaster, that the people who were asking for it were the people who were watching the HBO series, at least.
Yes.
And maybe the people who hadn't played the past 2 iterations of The Last of Us, because not everybody played the one that came out, like, what was it, like a year after it came out on PlayStation 3.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and there was an addressable market of people who were willing to buy the remaster. So why would you not do something again that had been previously successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy lift for PlayStation, for Naughty Dog, and they're going to make money. Last time I checked, Hamp, companies are in the business to do what?
Yeah. So again, like I always say, you know, just ask yourself Rick Grimes's, you know, 3 questions from The Walking Dead. Right? How does it affect the business? How do I expect it's going to affect other gamers, or other gamers are going to receive it? How does it impact me? I'm not going to play the TLU 2 remaster. That's not my plan. I played through like 80% of that game twice, and fell off of it each time, not being willing to finish it because there was just a lot of content there that I didn't care about. So I just did that in the last year of PlayStation 4, so I don't personally feel the need to play the PlayStation 5 version of it. How do I think it's going to impact the rest of the market? Again, like I said, there are lots of people out there watching that television show. Some of them are new gamers. Some of them went out and bought a PlayStation 5 after they watched the show. Not all of them played, the TLU 2 the first time around. And they are interested in playing it in what is arguably, you know, the best format, on the best hardware that's available at the time. And so there's an addressable market for it. Is it going to be successful and profitable for them and do the things that it needs to do? My guess is it'll be maybe a little less successful than TLU 1, but I don't think it's going to negatively impact the business. And, you know, and what Sony is in the business of, you know, like I constantly compare them to Apple, is it's not always just about profitability, but a lot of it is about market share and market penetration, and a lot of that goes hand in hand with trying to achieve and maintain mind share. And so taking one of their most popular properties and getting it out on the street and having it, in a great format. I guess where I will back off a little bit of my contention that I'm not going to play it is I am always interested in these things when they port to PC and they're available in even higher graphical fidelity. Whether I buy it or not, I think it will be good to see this thing ported to PC, where it will be made available for other people who want to play it. I always notice that the Xbox people who are constantly on this bandwagon of more games available on more platforms everywhere, suddenly fall off of that narrative when it's the discussion of a PlayStation game being ported to PC. But that's another topic, I guess.
Yeah, and do me a favor, we have 130 people watching right now. Please hit that like button, helps the channel out. Really appreciate the support. Let me grab the super chat real quick. Andy Hart with the $5 pound says, I don't believe in Xbox tax, but I do think certain media outlets have a dislike for Microsoft and have an agenda and bias against them. That would mean that you do agree with the Xbox tax. Thank you for that super chat, by the way. Yeah, I think what always kind of what I always find interesting is when people, and that's why I was kind of asking the question, and I put this in the title, who asked for this? That tends to be like that knee-jerk reaction. And I think to your point, Hamp, I mean, if it's not for you, that's fair. I'm never going to say, hey, I'm never going to criticize someone who says, hey, this isn't for me. This doesn't check the box. But understand that other people, for the reasons you just mentioned, Logic, are going to be interested in this remaster.
You're not suggesting that different consumers have different requirements, are you?
No, not at all. I've never even heard of that. And that's my point. Like, people, I don't understand. Like, I've said this a million times about the gaming community. They treat gaming like it's a completely different from any other consumer product, that the laws of economics don't impact gaming industry the way it does with other consumer goods or mergers, acquisitions, that the way consumers purchase things and look at video games is somehow different. In the sense that consumers, like when they're buying TVs or they're buying something else, have a set of requirements. The same applies to video games. Consumers of video games have individual requirements that are not across the board, not the same across the board. They're different. This is why you see people who only own a PlayStation 5, who only own an Xbox, who primarily game on PC, who game on mobile, who game on their Xfinity remote, because they have different requirements. And so there are going to be people, to your point, Logic, that are going to want The Last of Us 2 remaster because, one, they may have played the original. Someone in the live chat says, I forget who it was, said, hey, I haven't played The Last of Us Part 2 since 2020. I want to play it again, and I'm willing to pay the $10 upgrade fee, which, by the way, was really smart by Sony to do.
Yeah, that's great, and it's a change from where we talk about where they were mealy-mouthed and muddling and poor about handling their messaging. I think it is I hate to use the term pro-consumer, but I'm not going to use
it. It's consumer friendly.
Yeah, it's a good, and it's a reversal. That's the key thing. That is the key thing from my perspective in the way that I talk about Sony. When I talk about Sony, is the thing that worried me coming into this generation, is the thing that I would cite as a risk for people who were fans of the platform, is the risk was that Sony was going to do a lot of what it has historically done, which is be bullheaded and say, when they were saying we don't think that there's a need to shift our strategy, we're going to double down on continuing to do what our consumer base bought into us for, and we're just going to keep plugging ahead. And I looked at the last 10 years, 20 years of the tech industry, and I looked at things like, BlackBerry failing to recognize what was going on with the iPhone. I look at, great, nobody else is old enough to remember this thing, but I look at Wang. I look at hard drive manufacturers.
I remember Wang.
I look at hard drive manufacturers who failed to realize and see the consumer market pivot to SSDs, who went out of business. And I was like, here's Sony saying that they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. And what I was looking for was, are they just going to not see the iceberg in enough time and change what they're doing? But over the last couple of years, since Jim Ryan, kind of rose into power, I have seen them try to adjust their strategy. And you can not agree with their strategy and nitpick at it and feel like, well, this is not the thing that they should be doing. But what I will definitely say is the one thing you shouldn't do in the tech industry is you shouldn't remain static, and you shouldn't fall into the innovator's dilemma and not see when it's time to make a change. And often, I'll say any change is better than no change at all, right? So
No,
it's good to see,
yeah.
it's good to see them have this kind of change in policy and outlook. And it may herald a kind of a new approach of becoming a little bit less of the pay station.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, to your point, considering how muddled, and actually, in my opinion, how bad the messaging was with the upgrade path at the start of the gen, this is certainly a welcome change in messaging from PlayStation, because especially in light of how Microsoft was handling their upgrade path, which I thought was much better at the start of the gen than what Sony was doing.
Smart delivery is one of the best moves, ever in a console strategy.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Yeah, smart delivery is very consumer friendly, and which is why I didn't like when PlayStation had that kind of muddled messaging with their upgrade path.
Well, like I said, I mean, when they came out with smart delivery, I mean, the problem with the policy like that is it shines a flashlight on all the rats in the corner. Right now, anybody who's doing anything that appears to be less egalitarian, right, has a bad look on them. When you look over at Xbox and you say, hey, these guys are doing smart delivery, they're not charging us for an upgrade path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So existing owners of the game on PS4 can upgrade the remastered version on PS5 for $10 at launch. We talked about that. The remastered version of the game will feature enhanced graphics options on PlayStation 5, including native 4K output, improved texture resolution, and faster loading times. The DualSense controller's haptic feedback and adaptive triggers will also be utilized for better immersion. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. This is what really I wasn't planning on buying this game, but I might for this reason. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered will introduce 2 new modes. Speedrun mode, but this is the one that really caught my attention, and No Return, a roguelike survival mode. So that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I'm curious to see what that mode is, and hopefully they show more, show more footage of that survival mode. But that definitely piqued my interest, and definitely makes that $10 upgrade path a little more appealing to me. Did I miss a super chat? No, I did not. I already got that super chat. All right, Logic, any other thoughts on The Last of Us 2 Remaster?
I thought the comment in chat was very interesting. See, there is nuance. Sony gamers at the same time asked Naughty Dog to show up and start putting out new games. So, I mean, this is the cautionary tale that I would put out, and I'm sure Sony fans are going to get mad. I don't like, and I said the same thing to the Xbox fans. Actually had an argument on this show with various members of the cast, and I was like, I personally wouldn't put the entirety of the weight of Xbox on 343i, right, or on any one individual studio. I personally wouldn't put the weight of the entirety of the PlayStation brand on the shoulders of Naughty Dog. And one of the pieces that I wrote, I wrote it up on Twitter a few days ago, is, what I might theorize is that, the gaming industry has now been around for 51 years. And if you look at the time period between the late 90s and the early 2000s, so I hypothesized 1998 to 2005, there was a severe design divide that occurred during that time, where if you're on the other side of 2005 and looking rearward at the industry, you see points in the past of that timeline where games are just entirely different. And I wonder if we're seeing the same thing now, that roughly at about 20 to 25 years, and what this follows is kind of the career path and kind of generationally what would be experienced by game designers, where the game designers who were kind of in charge of the industry and brought us the games that became the most popular and were in the zeitgeist in the time period from the early 2000s to now, roughly a time frame of 20 to 25 years, they were heavily influenced and they grew up on the games that were on that other side of the divide, right? And so they produced games that kind of started burbling in their imagination during that time. Now what you're going to start to see is you're going to start seeing generational turnover. And you're going to see new designers coming into the fold who were informed by a different epoch of games. And therefore, that's going to beget different game designs. And so one of the things that this leads me to consider is that, particularly in your studios where somebody is the creative leader, and that is essentially a cult of personality, at least the way we perceive it from the outside. And so you look at Bethesda and Todd Howard, and I ascribe maybe some of this causality is why we have the view of Starfield that we do, is that it's not a matter of it was snubbed or Xbox tax or bias, but that design approach and that ethos and that creative leadership at that studio is starting to cut across this generational divide where it's falling out of favor. And I don't just mean that for Bethesda. I mean that for BioWare. I mean that for Blizzard. I mean that for studios of that ilk and of that time period, because that's kind of what we're seeing to a certain extent. And there are various conversations to be had about different studios and different updates. Somebody came back to me and said, well, what about Remedy? They're just as old as those other studios. I said, the difference with Remedy is you look at in their for instance that they gave was, we all played Max Payne and we're not tired of Remedy games. And I'm like, okay, but Remedy doesn't have a design house style. Max Payne is radically different than the design ethos of Alan Wake. And so a couple things will play out generationally. There's not the fatigue that there is of a particular design. And that clearly also indicates to me that there's something different about the makeup of teams and kind of the creative DNA at that studio where maybe you're not seeing the same effect. So my point of this is to also start having consideration that if BioWare is falling out of prominence and Bethesda is falling out of prominence and Blizzard is falling out of prominence, I don't know that I would place my money on Naughty Dog having the next series of bangers that achieve the same cultural impact that their previous games have, particularly when, as far as we know, at least I don't know what comes after Neil Druckmann, if it's the same kind of creative leadership, cult of personality at that studio. Whereas at Sony Santa Monica, right, we've seen a handoff of the baton, right? We've seen Jaffe leave, Cory Barlog come to rise. We've seen Cory Barlog put new directors right in charge of franchises and move on to another thing. We see some manner of succession, whereas I don't necessarily know that that's in place at Naughty Dog, and I don't know kind of what comes next for them if we look at them over the next 10 or 15 years.
I can't wait to see the comments section after this.
Yeah, people hate it when you come up with an idea.
Yeah.
People hate it when you don't regurgitate, what everybody else is saying.
And I don't think you're arguing that that in fact is going to happen with Naughty Dog, right?
Yeah, I'm saying it's a question. I'm saying, first of all, you're not going to know until you have 10 or 15 years of data from this point forward to kind of look backwards and review. Yeah. But it's something to keep an eye on. Yeah,
I just wanted to ask you that because people are going to take that because we see it. They're going to say, "Oh, Logic said that Naughty Dog's on, the downward trend or whatever." And that's not what you're saying. You're saying that's not definitively happened, but it's just something to kind of keep an eye on. Given some of the some of the examples we have of other studios in the past that have kind of hit that point, and we talked about Konami. I think it was yesterday we were talking about Konami. So I mean, I've seen instances of this where studios who were some of the top have kind of fizzled away. And I'm not saying it's going to happen with Naughty Dog, but and I'm not saying that's happening with Bethesda, but I think to your point with Starfield, for me, when I'm playing other open world RPGs, I think some of the other games that I play, they're open world in nature, have long dialogue trees, have maybe you can't pick up or store 1,000 sandwiches, but still have a world that you can interact with quite a bit. I think some of those games have delivered a better experience for me compared to Starfield. So.
Yeah, we've seen Nintendo cross that divide, right? But I think there are some things that go on there, culturally within that camp that you can attribute to the reason why. And Better of String says, I'm not going to pull this all apart, but it's all about knowledge transfer and Better. I don't know that I agree from a creative aspect, right? I mean, I can transfer knowledge in my personal philosophies to the next software architect coming behind me. But that software architect isn't going to design software based on those tenets and tent poles and philosophies and dogma that I have. They're also going to be informed by new tools that they've grown up with, new technological methodologies, new technical approaches, and they're going to come up with things of their own, and that's going to skew and it's going to spin from whatever basis I try to give them. And I'm sure there's some degree of knowledge transfer going on at the studios, but the point is that the creative aspect, right, takes that knowledge transfer and then spins it off in a different direction. But the my contention is maybe the studios that don't make those changes and don't make those pivots, that you're going to see those design approaches fall out of favor. And I liken it to the 49ers, right? When Joe Montana got it, it took Joe Montana getting injured to get them to make the decision that they needed to go find a Steve Young. And one of the things I wonder is, until those cult of personalities, right, hit speed bumps and commercial the failures maybe, but at least adversity or challenges, a couple of times in a row, then I think those questions start getting asked, and you maybe start to see a change in design leadership. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at Bethesda now that we've had Fallout 76, and I just don't know how Starfield is considered in that camp. Was it considered successful? Creatively, I'm sure. I reckon Todd Howard maybe isn't fully happy with the way that game has landed on the market, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the game has sold well. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine the commercial success of the game, he's probably happy with it. I wonder about the critical reception that the game's received compared to other games he's worked on, like Skyrim and Oblivion. So
I'm going to contend my psychoanalysis of Todd Howard is that he is in Orson Welles archetype, and that he would be much more concerned about the critical reception of the game than the commercial reception.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I'm speculating.
Yep. By the way, to our listeners, notice he said speculating, by the way. Just want to highlight that. That's what makes us different from many other podcasts out there. We let you know when we're speculating. We don't present it as actual facts. All right, Logic, do you want to go to Xbox losing market share? This popped up today per GameIndustry.biz. They had their video games in Europe report. Christopher Drink posted this on Twitter as well. But they looked at the hardware numbers for PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox Series X and S consoles. Assassin's Creed Mirage, by the way, was number 1, Spider-Man number 2 for the month of October. But what was interesting with this report was the year-over-year numbers for console sales for the three platforms. PlayStation 5 console sales are up 143% year-on-year. Switch sales are down 20%. That doesn't surprise me considering where the Switch is right now in its life cycle. It is what year? Is it year 7 now? No. When did it launch?
It's year
6.
6.
Year 6. Yeah. Thank you. Year 6. Which I'm not surprised. It's year 6, and how much it's. I mean, they sold 131 units now, so it's kind of hit that point where you'll probably start seeing those declines year over year. Maybe you see blips.
Peter, how many years has it been since March of 2017?
March 2017 ended 6 years ago.
6 years ago, yep. All right, and then Xbox Series X and S is down 52% year on year. So I was really surprised to see. Okay, maybe not surprised, because we've been seeing this trend quite a bit. But this is not, I think, where you want to be if you're selling hardware 3 years into the console generation, down negative 52% year over year.
And BRAP, just one alibi. I always screw this math up, just in the way I think about it. I get it right when I actually do the numbers, but it's actually technically we're into year 7. So it launched 6 years, 8 months, and it launched 6 years and 8 months ago. So 6 years have been completed. We're in the 7th year.
Yeah, we'll be 7 years coming up March of 2024.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just surprised, and what's really, and again, this isn't, I don't say this because I know people will be in their feelings and, oh my God, perhaps hating on Xbox. Oh my God, someone call Hillary right now. BRAP is hating on Xbox. We can't have that in this country. Hillary, BRAP is a deplorable. He's hating on Xbox. Sorry, that's my. I'm sorry. To be alive when Bill Clinton was president. No, it's for me. it's an interesting data point considering we're at year 3, and I thought that Microsoft did a really good job. I thought introducing the Xbox Series consoles. I thought that they had, I thought they did a good job at marketing the power of the Series X. So they checked that box off for people who were critical of them with the power narrative at the start of the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation. And then they also offered the cheapest entry point into next gen, or now current gen, consoles. And on top of that, had made significant studio acquisitions. And then, in 2017 released Game Pass. And I thought that with all of that, I didn't expect them to be in a position where hardware sales are down 50%. And Circana has reported similar data points. I know that Matt Piscatella had tweeted out, I'll have to find this tweet here real quick from Matt, but again, I didn't think that Microsoft would be in this position given what I thought was a better launch to the Xbox One, a better reveal, and really with Game Pass. I mean, to me, Game Pass is a tremendous value proposition. And again, this goes back to each consumer having their own individual requirements. I'm just surprised, Ham. To be honest, to be frank, I'm really surprised that there's less. Let me walk this back. I part of this too, I think, is that they haven't had that must-have killer app, and I've been on the record on the show many times, other podcasts saying they need to have that must-have killer app. They need to have games that get people off of their seats to the store to buy an Xbox or to invest in Game Pass. So what are your thoughts about some of these numbers that are coming out now, Logic?
Well, let me talk about some of them that are, entirely on the Xbox business case. A lot here kind of surprised me from the European numbers. The notion that Spider-Man was second, and I know that there was some lead lag time in terms of the total amount of sales time that titles were on the market. But, again, I'm an Ubisoft sedan, so I'm super impressed by Assassin's Creed Mirage coming out ahead of Spider-Man 2. And it shows well. I hope Ubisoft takes the positive demand signal they're getting from Assassin's Creed Mirage as a reason to double down and keep doing what they're doing. Just like when, Jedi Fallen Order came out a few years ago, and we're like, good, we hope that that's a demand signal that EA sees and stops all this rhetoric about, they're only going to do multiplayer games and starts to embrace single player content again. So I'm hoping that's what Ubisoft sees. I'm hoping that they see success from the dual pronged, Assassin's Creed approach. Actually, I would say triple pronged Assassin's Creed approach, right? Because they're going to continue doing open world. They're going to continue doing, this linear kind of story driven content, and then they're going to do something with kind of games as a service. And I'm hoping that they find success with all those. But yeah, I think overall my feeling about this is my kind of view and perspective of Xbox. And it's not necessarily a matter of being surprised by the numbers. It's a matter of from a performance and kind of a team review and sociological leadership review, in studying all the business cases that I have and kind of the evolution of technology businesses and whatnot, and all the academic work I've done oriented around that. I'm quite frankly kind of really surprised how just the chronology of the big tank up that was involved with the Xbox One launch, the kind of clawing back to recovery in the 2017-2018 timeframe of launching Game Pass, starting studio acquisitions, to just what to me is this kind of this real downturn in business savvy that I feel like I've seen in marketing and in PR and in messaging that I've seen in the post Xbox Series S and X launch. That I felt like, look, my own relationship with the brand was, I was kind of disappointed what I saw going on with Xbox One. But I did buy an Xbox One Scorpio, and then I stayed off of Game Pass. But I was like, okay, studio acquisitions, I like that. These are some studios I like. I like Playground. I love Obsidian. I liked a lot of the studios that they were acquiring. And then in 2019, they announced Day, Date, and PC Game Pass, and I was like, yeah, I like look, the new thing's coming next year. This was 2019 again, E3. I'm like, the new thing's coming next year. I want to be all in. I'm going to get on board. Game Pass Ultimate, like I'm all the way. I want to be spun up right by the time the next generation starts and go in feet first with Xbox Series. And then in the 3 years since then, we've had missing the Halo launch, which I didn't personally feel was critical, but definitely other people did. We have the drop off in the Forza franchise release cadence, production cadence. We have the weird nit that went on with Turn 10. I'm sure people are always saying, oh, yeah, but COVID. I've addressed that multiple times. Like Phil Spencer himself has said, we can say COVID all we want to, but that's an excuse. Those were his words. So we have the weirdness and release cadence of whatever went on with Turn 10. And then we have, Cerebon on stage in 2000. We have the dearth of releases in 2022. We have Cerebon on stage in 2022, being pushed out on the stage, told to give voice to this 12-month plan. We have the failure to meet the 12-month plan. We have multiple iterations of showcases not speaking to the 12-month plan. We had a show. We would have a showcase, not have dates trued up to the 12-month plan, and then 4 to 6 weeks later, hear announcements of delays. And I'm like, clearly 6 weeks ago, you guys knew that the game wasn't making the date, so you kind of deliberately held on to that information until after the showcase release. So that's in my mind, that's we talked about the bad messaging that was around PlayStation in the late Sean Layden, early Jim Ryan period. That performance in marketing and PR has been also way off base, even to a greater magnitude, in my opinion, in the Xbox camp, and it's not what I expected. I saw Phil Spencer, kind of coming to leadership, being raised up out of the ranks, reporting directly to Satya. Saw the team assembling around him, and I thought that there would be a different performance vector of that commercial business unit, going into this point in the generation. So it's just really surprising and not what I would have predicted. If I was doing NFL analysis of what was going to be the next football dynasty, this just kind of wouldn't have been my expected outcome.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, Matt Piscatella tweeted out hold on, here we go. 36 months in the market, U.S. hardware unit sales ranked by ecosystem. He had. I'm sorry, hold on just a sec here. Oh, let me. That's not it. Lifetime ending October 2023, U.S. hardware unit sales ranks by ecosystems. Xbox, he has a 360 ahead, Xbox One, original Xbox, and Xbox Series consoles. Lifetime ending October 2023, U.S. hardware unit sales by ranks. U.S. hardware unit sales ranks by ecosystem. This is for PlayStation only, PS2, PS4, PS3, PS5. No, I'm sorry, I read that incorrectly. PS2, PS5, PS4, PlayStation, PS3. Sorry about that. Now, Eagles fan in the live chat saying the console market is. I got to find this again.
No, I got it because I was gonna. So he says the problem you guys don't realize. So let me point out my first point of offense. Is telling me that there's something I don't realize when you haven't talked to me about it. Is don't realize is that the console only market isn't growing. It's been finishing the same for Sony as costs go up and profits go down. So that's a great re-articulation and repeat of a point that Sean Layden made. So I'm glad that you read that. Microsoft is doing a different approach, even though consoles are important. They are putting their services everywhere. My problem with Xbox is marketing. They need to put more in the marketing budget. So again, since you and I haven't talked about this, and since I can only assume based on what you articulated that you haven't followed my podcasting career for the last 9 years and heard me talk about these points in the past, Microsoft is following a different approach. I talked about that 6-7 years ago. I talked about Microsoft leveraging the adjacency in the strengths that they have in the cloud market. I talked about how it was smart. I've talked about it on this show as well, how it was smart to go with a different strategy, that it didn't make sense that if you have long arms to stay in and punch against Mike Tyson toe-to-toe. I talked about how they have changed the definition of the war, right? Not trying to fight the battle and go sale for sale and title for title with Sony, because that strategy was apparently ineffective. I talked about how if you look over the past 50 years of the technology industry, how those are the companies that survive. IBM pivoting into enterprise allowed them to not go the way of Wang. Microsoft pivoting into enterprise allowed them to also not go the way of Wang, or Xerox, and lose significant market share. I've talked about how BlackBerry best would have had the chance to pivot, because what people really needed out of the BlackBerry camp was their enterprise server and all of its security certifications and security qualifications in the DoD, in the DNI space. But they didn't. They kept doubling down on the phone, even though people were telling Lazaridis not to do that. And he didn't recognize what was going on with the iPhone. So I do absolutely realize what Microsoft is doing. And I do absolutely realize the strategy that they're following. My point from a consumer, and if you're a business analyst and you're investing in stock, then maybe that makes a difference to you. But what we often talk about on this podcast is what matters to gamers. And I'm not saying that like you shouldn't have an opinion and you can't do business analysis and you can't have the interest you have. What I'm talking about is how most of what we see are opinions being offered up by people who claim that they're gamers. And my point is that despite the changes in that strategy and the difference that they're making and the things that they're doing to try and survive and the things that they're doing to try and remain a going concern in the gaming industry, that is not resulting in us getting better games. That is my point. And that is the point, that should be the end point for most people that are consumers in this market. Is at the end of the day, I personally am not getting better products out of Microsoft. I am not getting games that are coming out that are harnessing the power of the Xbox Series X.
Logic.
Yeah, sir.
They you got Pentiment, Grounded. Come on, man. Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah, I should be satisfied with everything that's in Game Pass.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm not. And I'll admit, part of my own personal, line of sight is I got onto the Xbox platform and I came to love what was on the Xbox platform because of a lot of their legacy franchises, Halo, Gears of War, Forza. I know, Microsoft has talked about and their fans have talked about how Microsoft should be more than that. And I'm fine with them being more than that. But the problem is that they're not doing more than that. They're doing other than that. And so we don't have output out of the great quadruple A studio that was the initiative. And in fact, that guy who was the leadership of the company, his LinkedIn has not associated him with that company, and his Twitter account has not associated him with that company, and the website has been hampered / down, not quite down, but it has been giving the appearance that somebody's not maintaining it for the better part of a month or 2 months. So we don't have any output coming out of the AAA studios. We don't have production pipeline output that's commensurate with the number of studios that they have. And we don't have quality output that's associated. We don't have quality output in terms of summer blockbuster type of content. And so it's great if you want AA stuff. It's great if you want kind of lower scale stuff. And it's great then if you find happiness with Game Pass. My contention is everybody who loves this new strategy, then what that tells me is what the type of gamer you should be, is you should be the type of gamer who's playing Xbox games on your tablet, playing Xbox games on your phone, playing Xbox games on your Fire Cube, playing Xbox games on your Samsung TV. But what I seem to keep running into are people who say that they love the console, and my point is that the console is falling into lower priority and is not getting the content. So, I mean, again, you could be happy with the strategy. That's great. You could be a business analyst, I guess, because you want to invest stock. That's great with them peanut buttering their games everywhere. I don't want to play their games everywhere. I want to play their games on PC and I want to play their games on the console. And the console, like I said, is 9% of the greater console install base and is not getting newer, better games that are harnessing the power. I didn't want to play Starfield at 4K 30 so that I could track 1,000 sandwiches on the other side of the universe.
It's a fair point. I want to respond to, and I think what Eagles fan is saying. I think you're saying that the number of people who are buying hardware or consoles isn't growing per se, but let me I just want to rattle off this number here. Global gaming console market size reached $38.5 billion in 2022, and is projected to reach $50.2 billion. That's U.S. dollars. is projected to reach 50.2 billion by 2028. So this is exhibiting a growth rate of 4.9% between 2023 and 2028. The U.S. is the market leader with a share of 20 billion in 2021, followed by Japan, China, Germany, and the U.K. The growth of the market is driven by factors such as the increasing popularity of cloud gaming, the launch of new generation consoles, the rising demand for immersive gaming experiences, and expansion of online multiplayer gaming communities. All right, let me grab this super chat here. Stanley buffeting with the $2 super chat says, Logic, do you expect the Xbox Series S or the Xbox Series consoles to outsell the PS5?
If you go back to 2019, 2020, my expectation would have been the gap wouldn't be so big. Maybe that they would have maintained parity, but I would have expected them to be more like maybe 10 million units behind. Right, in comparison, I would not expect the gap. I would not expect them to be getting outsold nearly 2-1. I would not expect to see almost static Game Pass numbers. I would have seen, and again, this is kind of my problem, like this commentary that Xbox is following a new strategy, and like again, that new strategy isn't resulting in higher Game Pass numbers, isn't resulting in higher investment in more AAA game blockbusters. Isn't resulting in things harnessing the power of the hardware, like I mentioned. It's great that they're following a new strategy. I just haven't seen the outputs of the new strategy outside of them being able to go to Satya and borrow $70 billion so that they could acquire Activision. But that's not really what I was hanging my hopes on, or what really my conditions of satisfaction were for the business unit and for the console.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I would have expected the gap to be less, like more along the lines of 10 million units.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you logically. I think with everything, the way they teed everything up prior to the generation with the Series S,
I thought it would have been a fight.
Yeah, with Game Pass, coupled with Game Pass and Xbox Series X, I didn't expect 2-1. And in light of having Game Pass, a tremendous value add, and the cheapest entry point, what I'm seeing is that consumers are telling us we want to pay more money for the PlayStation 5. I didn't, and again, I didn't think that the series consoles would outsell. I agree with Logic. I just didn't think the gap was going to be a 2-1 gap. I thought that Microsoft did a much better job in its marketing and providing consumer friendly options. And it just, I don't want to say those things don't matter, but the demand signal from consumers is that we want we want the PlayStation 5. We don't care about these other things.
Or that it was going to be backsliding the way it is. That's
the other thing. Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
If you go back over their earnings reports, right, for the last 3 years, for the last 4 years, you can see the inflection point, right, in their commentary associated with what they're briefing at their earnings reports. And you can see a point in the timeline where there is growth in the, I can't remember what the third reporting segment is called, but it's like consumer devices and services. You can see where there's growth, small growth, right, in that reporting segment, because they only have 3. Like cloud is one, and I think Windows and Enterprise or something is the other. I can't remember exactly, but in consumer devices and products, you can see where there's slight growth, and they attribute that growth to gaming. But you can, if you lay all those reports out over the 36 to 48 month time frame, you can see a point where that voice track stops and drops off, and they no longer attribute anything positive that's going on in that reporting segment to games. You can also then see another inflection point where that revenue and profit starts moving backwards, and there are a couple points in there where they attribute that negative growth to Xbox. So you can see over the 3 or 4 year time period how the voice track changes, right, in terms of kind of how they feel about how the division is performing. So again, I just go back to, this just isn't, where I would have expected the business unit to be from a performance aspect. And like I said, I thought this generation was going to be much more of a knife fight and much more back and forth, and not. I mean, look, if this were a heavyweight bout, right, we would be at the stance where we would have 12 rounds scored, right, for PlayStation.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't expect either Logic that they would be sliding backwards, that we would see negative growth, and not just in Europe, but here in the U.S. as well. And this is where Microsoft, the Xbox brand, performs the best here in the U.S. And I know Eagles fans saying, hey, they're going to be releasing they're dropping 4 games a year coming 2024 and beyond. That's great, Eagles fan, but for me spending $500 on an Xbox Series X, like I shouldn't have to wait 4 years. Like
I don't want one of those games to be Tower Watch.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't want a game like Tower Watch, and those games are not all going to be AAA games, and that's fine. They don't have to be. But my point is like, if I look at the competition and what the competition's released in 3 years, I mean, like that for me, that checks off my boxes, fulfills my requirements. And while I think it's great that Microsoft's going to be releasing, more 4 games a year starting in 2024, to me personally, that's too little, too late. Maybe that's good for someone who buys an Xbox next year. I just, yeah. I mean, Eagles fans saying you did on PS4. It took to like 2017. Eagles fan, I really wasn't on the PlayStation 4 early on in the console gen, the last console gen. I was actually, Xbox One was actually my preferred platform at the time because they were releasing more content. PlayStation 4 was kind of like the indie station, if you will, at the start of that gen. But as I started gaining more momentum, I went back. But I don't think what I want is, I think what Microsoft's going to deliver are probably be 2 different things, and that's fine. It just means it's not for me. If it's for someone else, that's okay too.
Yeah, we need to true up the conversation because it always gets off skew. So, yeah. I mean, Eagles fan, I'm not sure exactly what you're arguing, but let me say this: I'm not going to have an argument with you about what I like. That's not a conversation. We're talking about market analysis, right, and market assessment, and also what's not an argument is that PlayStation is outselling Xbox. Period. Now, if your contention is that's okay because Xbox has a different strategy, that's fine. But again, what I go back to is tell me how the strategy is yielding quantifiable, greater output. You mentioned that they're increasing their marketing budget. But again, if their marketing budget doesn't mean more Game Pass subscribers, and I'm not talking about the 11 million Xbox Live Gold people that they just flipped over to Game Pass so that they could claim greater Game Pass numbers. Like, again, increase their marketing budget. The gaming leadership team sat on top of Bethesda and micromanaged Starfield coming out, right? But at the end of the day, that happened. What is the thing that I said before Gamescom, BRAP? I said, so everybody's hyper-focused on Starfield, and this is one of the things that I've dealt with corporately and in leadership teams. Everybody's hyper-focused on Starfield. What's going to happen with Forza? And like I said, we point to the fact that, at least in one pocket, but also a very believable pocket of user community reviews in Steam, they are not happy with Forza. So again, I mean, what Starfield proves to me is that Microsoft can get out a good game that moves the needle, that achieves commercial success when the GTL sits on top of the studio and micromanages it coming out. But if you're trying to get to 4 games coming out each year at high quality, how does that work, right? If your leadership team can't spread themselves a little out, maybe the restructuring, maybe the reorg is going to help. Mm-hmm. But my whole point of this is that we're talking about commercial success. The commercial success isn't there, period. It's not really an argument. It's quantifiable. We're talking about what is their potential. I'm willing to go into next year, but I'm with BRAP. I don't really care about next year, but the discussion is about what they've delivered to date. Do we expect things to be better next year? I just don't know that all the tea leaves are lining up, right, to prove that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hamp. All right, I do have a hard stop here and need to wrap up the show, but I want to thank everyone in the live chat for coming by and hanging out with us this afternoon. To those who are in the U.S., have a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time off. Maybe get some gaming in. Maybe watch some football. Eat lots of turkey. And Logic, thank you so much again, man. Appreciate your time. I don't know if you want to be found, but if you do, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can check out other podcasting content. It's slightly different, just our agenda and whatnot, over on the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube.
All right. Everyone, do me a quick favor. We have about 150 people watching. Please hit that like button. Helps the channel. Really appreciate the support. Eagles fan says go Eagles. Hey, I got to give the Eagles their flowers. They're 9-1. Yeah. As a Commanders fan, it's hard to give them their flowers, but they're playing well. So can't take that away from them. But yeah, everyone, we'll be back next Wednesday at our regular scheduled time at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the holiday, and we'll see you next time.